somebody, some wife shot her husband in her home because they were locked down because of COVID-19, so he died of COVID-19. I mean, it's almost not funny that it's become a joke because the public seems to know that now everything is being overclassified as COVID-19 related.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is a really important thing to look at because this comes from directives from our public health organizations and agencies.
Including the CDC as well, right?
Yeah. The CDC issued a special document that's a guidance on filling out death certificates. And they've essentially gone away from their usual protocols where you want to have some certainty about the cause of death. And they've said that even if there's suspicion that COVID might be the cause of death, that you should just put that as the cause of death on the death certificate without any further scrutiny. In Minnesota, there was a directive that said if someone dies and you suspect it may be COVID-19 related, that not even to bother doing a test post-mortem, just label them on the death certificate as COVID-19. And then I also got a document, I think it was from the health commissioner or possibly the governor of New Jersey, a letter to healthcare providers, and it instructed them that in the usual procedure when there's a health crisis, that they normally would send bodies of people suspected to die related to the crisis for autopsy to the medical examiner. But it said in this case, to not send any bodies to the medical examiner, to just essentially label them as COVID-19 deaths. And the only reason I could see that they would institute such a policy is that if they sent them for autopsy, they would probably find that they died of a regular cause. And this would affect the numbers in a bad way in terms of if you're trying to create the appearance that a lot of people are dying from COVID-19. So what I've done in order, since you can't trust this data about the cause of death because of these instructions.
And just, by the way, I just want to interrupt really quickly. I've seen interview after interview with these doctors talking about how there's no precedent of any kind of guesswork on an autopsy and on a death certificate. You just say the evidence. And yet this is the first time they're being encouraged to write down the COVID-19. And you hear doctor after doctor talking about how peculiar this is. And I mean, I've gotten emails from people here in the UK telling me of scenarios where they took in their 80-something-year-old, grandfather with kidney failure. He was forced to sign a do not resuscitate order. He was told later he had COVID-19 symptoms. He died. Later, they were told he was never tested positive, but he was being qualified as a death of that type. I mean, we're hearing this over and over again. It's almost flabbergasting to hear.
Brian, I've even heard one account where someone's child, I think they were a young adult, died in a motor vehicle accident. And on the death certificate, it said they died of COVID-19, and they were really upset because they had no legal recourse related to the traffic accident to, file with the police or get reimbursed by the insurance company because the death was recorded as being from COVID-19.
I mean, that's ludicrous. I mean, somebody told me, I think it was Dr. Buttar told me a couple of days ago that someone was driving a car with a face mask on, and he does not believe that those even should be used, suffered from lack of oxygen, crashed their car, and it was COVID-19. It's just hard to believe that's even happening.
It really is. And there's so many accounts that I've heard directly from people speaking with me about this that, you combine that with the official documents and you see that this is going on. And so this is why I don't think you can accurately look at any mortality figures attributed to COVID-19 as being accurate whatsoever.
Why is this happening? Why would something like the Center for Disease Control, ask doctors to fudge numbers to inflate the COVID-19 related deaths? I mean, on such a mass scale and at such a high level.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not advising the CDC how to proceed. So whatever I say would be somewhat speculative on my part. But in looking at what I do know about the CDC, one thing is that it is mostly funded actually by private industry. So there's something called the CDC Foundation, and you see that all of the major companies that represent the healthcare industry, such as pharmaceutical companies, health insurance companies, medical device companies, etc., are the financiers of the CDC. And they certainly have a lot of profit to gain based on having a serious pandemic and needing to sell vaccines or testing kits and things like that. I think the hospitals are in a different position financially right now. But it seems that all of the policies that they've initiated would have to be for the immediate purpose of inflating the perception of the health consequences of this COVID-19 situation. But it's definitely not grounded in reality. So I don't really feel that there's any evidence of increased mortality. And this is the main statistic that I've been looking at, because the way that governments and other organizations identify a possible new health threat is that they look at what they call excess mortality. So in other words, compared to previous years, how many people are dying this year? And if there's a spike in the number of deaths, then that indicates possibly a new health crisis, and then that could be further investigated. So just this morning, I was looking at the CDC website because they've been reporting weekly mortality statistics since the beginning of the year. And they have this table on their website that's updated on a daily basis, and I've been following it now for about a week. And it reports something very interesting. So it gives of course, the deaths that they attribute to COVID-19, but it also gives the all-cause mortality. So this is, the total number of people that died of any cause. And that is a much more reliable number. It still may have some inaccuracies, but it doesn't have all of the subterfuge associated with the COVID on the death certificate. And what they've done is they've compared this number to the average of the past 3 years, from 2017 through 19. During the same exact weeks. And then they have a running tally for year to date. And so what they are reporting pretty consistently is that the number of deaths this year, year to date, is less than the average of the past 3 years. And currently the number is 94%. So 6% less people have died so far this year in the United States compared to the past 3 years on average. And that amounts to 44,242 people. So those people would have died last year, but they're alive this year. So, if there's no increase in overall mortality, and in fact, there's actually a decrease, then what's the evidence that there's a new